The clock in the meeting room seemed louder than the executives' voices. Sophia felt her heart beat the same rhythm, irregular, tense. Across from her, her brother, Alexandre, wore the same confident smile she'd known since childhood, the same one he'd worn before stabbing himself without leaving any blood. "I'm sorry, Sophia, but the audit found irregularities under your management," he announced, his voice deep and measured, as if offering condolences to a stranger. The air grew heavy, and eyes turned to her like blades. Sophia tried to speak, but her throat closed. The document on the table bore her digital signature, forged. Alexandre leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together on the table, observing her reaction with cruel serenity. "You've always been talented, but the company can't be involved in scandals." The board remained silent. No one dared challenge him. She looked at her father, sitting at the head of the table. Eduardo Mendes, the patriarch, couldn't look at her. The same man who had taught her that the family name was sacred now averted his eyes as if she were a mistake. It was then, in that moment, that Sophia understood. Truth didn't matter. Power spoke louder than blood. When the decision was given, she slowly stood up, straightened her jacket, and said firmly, "Fine, but remember, Alexandre, that what is built on lies crumbles with a whisper." No one responded. She left without looking back, hearing only the sharp click of the door closing, like the end of a life that was no longer hers. Hours later, back home, her phone vibrated incessantly with headline notifications. Mendes Corp director fired for multi-million-dollar fraud. Each headline was a stab in the back. Sophia hung up the phone, opened a bottle of wine, and gazed out the window at the city. Outside, everything remained the same, but inside, something had changed forever. In the early hours of the morning, the apartment was silent. Sophia sat at her computer and opened an encrypted folder, one no one knew existed. Inside were old reports, signatures, transaction records. She took a deep breath. "If he wants war, he'll get war," she murmured. Her fingers began typing, and the first plan was drawn up. The sun was rising when she sent her first anonymous email to a well-known reporter. No false information, just enough to raise doubts. As the email was confirmed, she felt a shiver run down her spine. It was the beginning of the counterattack. Alexandre thought he had won. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. If you also believe that sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those we trust most, subscribe to the channel now, because here, each story reveals what blood tries to hide. In the following days, Sophia's name became synonymous with scandal. Business magazines, gossip columns, and TV shows repeated the story like a mantra. She was the woman who betrayed her own flesh and blood. Doors closed, friends disappeared, and even the housekeeper resigned, with a look of pity that hurt more than any headline.
But Sophia didn't cry. She watched. Every post, every note, every silence had a pattern. Alexandre controlled the narrative perfectly, the betrayed hero who sacrificed his sister for the good of the company. His public image grew while hers disintegrated. It was then that she realized she would only win if she used the same weapons, invisible, cold, precise. One night, while reviewing old reports, she found something curious, a transfer made months earlier from an offshore account using a code she recognized. It was Alexandre's digital signature, masked by an internal company filter. Her blood ran cold. He hadn't just framed her, he'd used the money to plug a hole he'd created. The discovery rekindled the flame that fear had extinguished. Sophia began gathering evidence, cross-referencing information, analyzing metadata. Every detail became a piece of the puzzle that revealed the truth. She no longer sought just innocence, she sought destruction, and to do so, she needed patience. Meanwhile, her father, Eduardo, made a point of not mentioning the matter. At family gatherings, there was an awkward silence whenever her name was mentioned. Her mother, Ailing, sent short messages, always the same. "Take care, daughter." Sophia responded with kind words, but felt that little by little, she was becoming a ghost. One morning, the phone rang. It was Helena, Alexandre's former aide. "Sophia, I've seen things I can no longer ignore," she said. Her voice trembled. "He's hiding something, and if I help you, I want one thing in return: justice." Sophia smiled, for the first time in weeks, not with joy, but with certainty. The first piece of the plan had just been moved. In the days that followed, Sophia and Helena began meeting secretly at a discreet downtown cafe. They exchanged information, strategized, and tested boundaries. The game had changed. Sophia was no longer the victim. She was the architect of an empire on the brink of ruin. That night, alone, Sophia wrote in a notebook, "To defeat Alexandre, it's not enough to be right. The world must believe the right lie." And when she closed the notebook, she knew revenge was no longer just a reaction. It was her new purpose. The early morning was the time when Sophia felt most alive. While the city slept, she relived the fateful meeting in her mind. Every look, every word, every silence. There was something about the way Alexandre held the papers, the theatrical calm with which he announced his resignation. He had prepared for this. Every move had been rehearsed. But what he hadn't anticipated was that she knew how to play the game too. The makeshift office in the apartment became a war bunker. Folders were open, notes were on the walls, flash drives were hidden in unlikely places. Helena, always precise, helped decipher internal codes and track encrypted messages. "She's using intermediaries to move money from subsidiary accounts," she explained. Sophia simply nodded. "And the digital signature?" she asked. "It's his. I'd recognize the pattern even with my eyes closed."
The first concrete evidence emerged. They were fragments, but enough to create a convincing trail. Sophia filed everything with almost military discipline. Her face, previously haggard, now held a firm expression. "He won't realize he's being surrounded until it's too late," she murmured. And Helena responded with a slight smile. "You sound like someone who's already won." Meanwhile, Alexander was enjoying his public peak. He was invited to business programs and lectures on leadership and corporate ethics. He spoke in a moralistic tone, extolling the courage to make difficult decisions for the company. Sophia watched the videos, jotting down phrases she would use against him. "He's not just a liar," she told Helena. "He's an artist, and I'm going to destroy him with his own art." As the weeks passed, small cracks began to appear. 2 directors resigned abruptly. A supplier leaked documents that compromised Alexander's management. No isolated scandal, but a series of incidents that began to erode the board's trust. It was exactly as Sophia had planned: slow, silent, inevitable. One rainy afternoon, Sophia went to the cemetery to visit her mother who had died years ago. She stood before the headstone silent. "Mom, you always said I was the peacemaker in the family," she whispered. "But sometimes peace is just the interval between 2 wars." When she left, there was something different in her eyes, a gleam somewhere between sadness and power. That night, the phone rang again. It was Livia, the cousin who had always orbited between the 2 brothers, ambitious and curious. "Sophia, I know you haven't embezzled anything, but I also know you won't stand idly by." Her voice sounded provocative. "If I help you, I want guarantees." Sophia smiled. "Help or participate?" she asked. Livia hesitated for a moment before answering, "It depends on what's at stake." She knew this would be a dangerous alliance. But every war needs soldiers, and Livia was the type to fight for the side that promised the greatest prize. "If you stay with me, there will be no turning back," Sophia warned. "I'm not one to back down," her cousin replied firmly. And so, the triangle was formed: Sophia, Helena, and Livia, each with her own truth, each with her own lie. Alexander always craved control. Since childhood, he planned every step, every response, every look. Now, as CEO, this had become an obsession. He monitored meetings, read reports meticulously, and demanded absolute loyalty. But something bothered him, a feeling that someone was watching him from the shadows. The anonymous emails that reached the boardroom put him on alert. "They're just rumors about competition," his aide said. But Alexander wasn't naive. He replied, "Rumors are seeds, and when planted in the right place, they can bring down an entire tree." That night, he called Helena into his office and asked her directly, "Do you still talk to my sister?" Her gaze wavered for a moment, unnoticeable to anyone except him. "No," she lied, and he smiled, satisfied. "Great. Keep it up."
Meanwhile, Sophia followed his every move. Through Helena, she received discreet updates on the director's movements, board meetings, and the documents Alexandre was trying to hide. "He's preparing an internal audit to find out who's leaking information," Helena informed her. Sophia simply replied, "Perfect. That way, he'll dig his own grave." The atmosphere at the company began to shift. Employees whispered in the hallways, directors avoided direct contact with the CEO. Trust, once solid, became fragile. Alexandre felt the invisible weight of fear spreading through the corridors of Mendes Corp. In one of the meetings, he exploded. "Someone here is betraying me, and when I find out who it is, they'll regret ever being born." The silence that followed was deathly. That same day, Sophia sent her father a printed letter, something he couldn't trace. It simply said, "Not all thieves steal money, Dad. Some steal the legacy." Eduardo read the message 3 times silently. Something inside him began to crumble. As the patriarch was filled with doubts, Alexandre realized that the press no longer treated him with such reverence. Articles began to appear, questioning recent decisions and speculating about administrative misconduct. He blamed the opposition, but a seed of paranoia began to grow. For the first time, he doubted his own control. Sophia, on the other hand, remained serene. She spent her days between discreet coffees and secret meetings with Helena and Livia. "He's starting to suspect me," Helena said worriedly. "Good," Sophia replied, looking out the window. "When he sets his sights on you, he'll stop looking at me." The plan unfolded like a dark symphony, each note perfectly calculated. But deep down, something was troubling her. In a moment of silence, Sophia looked at an old photo of the 2 brothers as children, laughing together, unburdened by power. For a second, she hesitated. "What if all this turns me into him?" she whispered to herself. The echo of her question was lost in the sound of the rain, and she decided not to answer. When Alexandre, in yet another interview, proudly declared that the Mendes family will always unite for the truth, Sophia calmly turned off the TV. "Yes," she murmured, "but the truth is mine now." The first news came as whispers, small notes on financial blogs about irregularities in the management of Mendes Corp. At first, no one took them seriously. But in the following weeks, the stories grew, and the words fraud, abuse of power, and corruption began to appear side by side with Alexandre's name. Sophia read each article with an almost poetic calm, like someone watching a play they wrote but no longer need to direct.
On her computer, an anonymous email network was ready for the next move. Helena sent the documents to selected journalists, using VPNs and random times. "We don't need to prove everything at once," Sophia said, "just enough to make the council doubt it." Each leak was surgical, calculated to appear coincidental, not conspiratorial. Meanwhile, Alexandre tried to control the damage. He called emergency meetings, hired external auditors, and repeated the same speech. Transparency is the foundation of our legacy. But the confidence in his eyes was beginning to fade. In the reflection of the office's glass windows, he saw his own image trembling, as if the edifice he had constructed were beginning to crack. At a family dinner, the atmosphere was tense, masked by smiles. Eduardo, the father, asked coldly, "Alexandre, are you sure there's nothing you need to tell me?" The silence that followed was too long. "Of course not, Dad," he replied, but his trembling voice betrayed him. Sophia, sitting across the table, kept her gaze serene and her wineglass still. It was the kind of victory that needed no words. Livia, the cousin, had become the operation's riskiest link. Ambitious and overly curious, she was beginning to act on her own. "If I'm the bridge to the family, I want more than crumbs," she said in an encrypted call. Sophia took a deep breath. "Be careful, Livia. Too much greed attracts too much light." But deep down, she knew her cousin would be useful until the day she stopped being. The following weeks turned the company into a minefield. Directors eyed each other suspiciously. Shareholders split into factions, and rumors of an internal traitor became inevitable. Alexandre tried to maintain a facade, but the dark circles under his eyes, his harsh tone, and the sleepless nights betrayed his growing fear. He didn't know it yet, but the enemy was already inside the castle. One Sunday morning, Helena called. "He's desperate. He's had all the accounts from the last 5 years reviewed." Sophia smiled. "Perfect. The more he looks, the more he'll find what I want him to see." On the other end of the line, Helena hesitated. "Sophia, is this still about justice?" There was a long silence before the answer. "No, Helena. This is about balance." The plan was moving forward. In her room, Sophia observed a mural of photos, documents, and connections. Alexandre's face was at the center, surrounded by red lines. It was almost a work of art. "Every line needs a mirror, and I will be his." In the background, the distant sound of thunder seemed to mark the beginning of the next phase, that of destruction. The morning of the board meeting began with palpable tension. The Mendez Corp building was filled with press cameras, reporters, and rumors that something big was about to happen. Sophia, outside, watched the action from afar, sitting in a discreet car. Helena, on the phone, narrated every detail. "He's pale. He seems nervous," she said. Sophia replied coldly, "He's going to get a taste of his own medicine today."
Inside, Alexander tried to maintain his composure. "It's all just a smear campaign," he stated, raising his voice. But the looks on his face were no longer the same. One of his advisors interrupted him. "Campaigns like this don't just happen, Alexander. Where there's smoke, there's fire." He tried to argue, but every word seemed to fuel the distrust. It was like trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline. Outside, Sophia watched the messages arriving on her cell phone. "The council has called for an extraordinary vote." It was what she'd expected. The first act of destruction was complete. Now everything depended on maintaining control and not letting anyone see how deeply she was sinking into the very thing she'd sworn to fight. At home, his father watched the internal broadcast of the meeting with a devastated expression. Eduardo had dedicated his life to that company, and watching his children turn that legacy into a war consumed him. He picked up the phone and called Sophia, but she didn't answer. Not yet. She knew every second of silence increased the weight of doubt in his mind. During the vote, the result was a resounding blow. The board approved a formal investigation into Alexander's management. He stood motionless, his face rigid, his gaze lost. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low and cold. No one responded. It was the same silence Sophia had heard on the day of her dismissal, only now it echoed from the other side. 2 days later, the news spread. Mendez Corp under internal investigation. CEO questioned for mismanagement. Shares fell, and journalists surrounded Alexander in front of the building. He responded with rehearsed phrases, but his expression betrayed his weariness. "The empire is crumbling," Elena commented. "Not yet," Sophie replied. "Just the foundations." That night, while reviewing new documents, Sophia received a video. It was Alexander, alone in his office, smashing a bottle of whiskey against the wall. "Who's doing this to me?" he shouted, staring at the security cameras. Sophia watched in silence. No pleasure, no joy. Just the coldness of revenge doing its job. Livia called next, euphoric. "He's finished. His father is furious with him." But Sophia responded with icy calm. "Don't be fooled, Livia. He still has cards, and the wounded man is the most dangerous." Deep down, she knew the game was far from over. The war had only changed its face, and perhaps its soul. Looking at the computer screen, Sophia saw her own reflection in it. For the first time, she noticed something unsettling. The once serene gaze was now dark, impenetrable. It was the look of someone who no longer distinguishes victory from revenge.
The cafe where Sophia scheduled her secret meetings was discreet, hidden between two office towers in the city center. It was the kind of place where secrets exchange hands without leaving a trace. On that rainy morning, she arrived earlier than planned. Helena appeared minutes later, looking nervous, and Livia followed closely behind, displaying the self-confidence typical of someone who believes they are in control of their own ambition.
"We have a problem," Helena began, looking around before speaking. "An internal auditor has started tracking suspicious emails. If he gets too close, he'll discover connections to your name." Sophia remained calm, slowly swirling the cup in her hands. "Then you're going to help him find something else, something to distract him." Livia smiled curiously. "And what would that be?" Sophia looked up. "A lie bigger than the truth." Helena hesitated. "This is dangerous, Sophia. If it goes wrong, we all fall together." Sophia leaned forward firmly. "There is no victory without risk. Alexander is vulnerable, and his father already has doubts about him. It's now or never." Her tone left no room for disagreement. Livia crossed her arms, smiling wryly. "You sound like someone who already knows the ending to this story." Sophia replied, "I wrote it." In the following days, the plan went into motion. Helena fed the auditor false information, and Livia used her family access to spread rumors among shareholders. "I heard Alexander is hiding a parallel fund abroad," she would say casually at dinners and meetings. In less than a week, the rumor became fact on everyone's lips. As the chaos unfolded, Sophia watched from afar, controlling everything like someone moving pieces on an invisible board. Every call, every email exchange was calculated with surgical precision. Helena, however, was beginning to grow restless. "He's your brother, Sophia, and you're going to destroy him completely." Sophia looked at her coldly. "He destroyed me first. I'm just balancing the game." But not all the pieces were moving as she wanted. Livia began to demand more. "I want to be on the board when he falls." Sophia stared at her silently. "Help me bring him down and we'll talk about the future." The answer was sharp, diplomatic, but it hid an empty promise. Sophia knew Livia wouldn't survive the chaos that would follow. In one of the emails intercepted by Helena, an unexpected piece of information emerged. Alexander planned to transfer a large sum of money to a secret account abroad, in his own father's name. "He's trying to protect himself," Helena said. Sophia remained silent, her face expressionless. But something in her gaze wavered. So his father was involved from the beginning. That night, alone in her apartment, Sophia reviewed old reports and found a series of joint signatures between Alexander and Eduardo. Her blood ran cold. "It wasn't just him," she murmured. "They did it together." For the first time, revenge lost its sharpness. The pain now had a different face, that of the man she still called father. The next few hours were a whirlwind of memories. Her father, proud, saying she was the most promising mind in the family. Her brother, arrogant, repeating that power demands sacrifice. And now, the revelation that they had both lied, together. Sophia spent the early hours examining contracts and financial authorizations. What she discovered wasn't just corruption, it was the heart of the company rotted by the greed of an entire generation.
The next morning, Elena appeared at her apartment. "You look different," she said, observing Sophia's distant expression. "I found out what they did," she replied bluntly. "My father helped Alexander hide the embezzlement. I was just a scapegoat." Helena was silent for a few seconds. "And now, are you going to destroy them both?" Sophia took a deep breath. "Now I destroy the legacy." Meanwhile, Alexander intensified his defensive measures. He installed new monitoring systems, cut off internal communications, and threatened to fire anyone who spoke to the press. But none of this prevented the next leak, a spreadsheet showing suspicious transactions in his father's name. When the news was published, the impact was devastating. The Mendez family went from being synonymous with power to being synonymous with scandal. Eduardo called his children together for a private meeting. The mood was mournful. "You're destroying what I've built," he said hoarsely. "There's no family left, Father," Sophia replied coldly. "Only what's left of your choices." Alexandra tried to intervene, but her gaze silenced him. For the first time, the patriarch saw something in his daughter's eyes he'd never seen before. The same coldness he'd always admired in his firstborn. After the meeting, Elena insisted, "Sophia, this is going too far. Now everyone will fall, including you." But Sophia was unwavering. "The truth must burn to purify, and if I have to burn with it, so be it." It was the first time she had spoken as someone who no longer sought victory, only closure. That night, Livia tried to take matters into her own hands. She contacted one of the journalists to reveal that Sophia was behind the leaks, hoping to gain power with Alexander, but Elena intercepted the message in time. "She's betraying us," he said. Sophia simply replied, "Leave it. Betrayal is predictable, and she will learn the price." Days later, a new dossier reached the press, this time with evidence that Alexander had manipulated tax documents. No one knew who sent it, not even Elena. The plan had already taken on a life of its own. Sophia no longer needed to push it forward. She could only watch the empire crumble. When her father suffered a mild heart attack, the news didn't shake her. She simply sat in the dark and wept silently, not from guilt, but from exhaustion. The real deviation was from love. For the first time, she realized she was no longer fighting for justice or power. She was fighting to survive within the ruin she had helped create. The phone rang in the early hours of the morning. Elena, crying. "He's sick, Sophia. You need to see him." She hesitated. For a moment, she considered leaving. Then she hung up. Revenge, after all, leaves no room for goodbyes. Alexander hadn't slept in days. His reflection in the mirror showed a different man, deep dark circles, stubble, and eyes that blended anger and despair. Every night he reviewed messages, calls, spreadsheets. Someone had betrayed him from within, and he needed to find out who. He installed new tracking software, had cameras reviewed, hacked into emails. "If you want to find a ghost, become one," his father had once said. Now, he was doing just that.
In the Mendes Corp building, the atmosphere was fearful. Employees walked silently, whispering through the hallways. Helena feigned normalcy, but she felt his gaze on her every step. One afternoon, Alexandre called her into his office. "You worked very closely with Sophia," he began with a cold smile. "I'm sure you still talk to her."
Helena kept her tone neutral. "Not since she left." He approached, lowering his voice. "If I find out you lied to me, you won't have a job anymore." Meanwhile, Sophia monitored his movements from afar. Helena updated her with coded messages. "He's suspicious of everything," she wrote. Sophia replied, "Let him be suspicious. Doubt is the slowest poison." But deep down, she felt the weight of something beyond her control. The newspapers no longer talked only about Alexandre. Now his father's name was in the headlines, and rumors swirled that a family member could be behind the leaks. At the next dinner, Alexandre arrived at his father's house with a somber expression. Eduardo was dejected, his voice weak. "You destroyed our family," he murmured. Alexandre exploded. "Me? Who told you that? Sophia, the perfect daughter you always preferred?" The old man stared at him. "She may have been wrong, but she didn't lie. You did." Alexandre's anger drove him out, slamming the door. The hatred, once contained, now burned silently. In her apartment, Sophia watched the news, feeling a mix of satisfaction and emptiness. "He's falling apart," she told Helena over the speakerphone. "Yes, but what about you?" her friend replied. "How long until you fall with him?" Sophia didn't answer. Silence was her only confession. She knew she wouldn't emerge unscathed, but she had already accepted the price. That week, Helena realized she was being followed. 2 men in a black car were watching her as she left work. She called Sophia, alarmed. "He's got people after me." Sophia, in a firm voice, replied, "Don't panic. That means he's too close to the fire." Then she hung up and began executing Plan B, to fully expose Alexandre before he could react. But there was another problem. Livia. Her cousin had disappeared. She wasn't answering calls or texts. Sophia learned she'd met with Alexandre 2 days earlier. "She'll turn you in," Helena warned. "Leave her alone," Sophia replied. "She thinks she can negotiate with him, but she doesn't understand that he destroys everything he touches." Even so, unease set in. The web was tightening, and Sophia, for the first time, felt like she might be trapped inside it. The next morning, an email with no sender arrived in her inbox. No text, just an image. A photo of her and Helena at the cafe, dated the previous week. Sophia's blood ran cold. He knew. The next morning, Sophia woke up to her phone vibrating non-stop. Messages, notifications, missed calls. She opened her email and saw the name she dreaded most, Livia Mendez. The subject line simply read, "You went too far." The contents were a complete dossier, evidence that Sophia was behind the leaks, complete with dates, accounts, and files. "She sold me out," she murmured. Helena arrived at the apartment minutes later, panting. "He has everything," she said. "But calm down. We can still turn this around."
Sophia took a deep breath. "You can't put out the fire," she replied, "but you can control it." She picked up her laptop, analyzed the email, and realized something. The evidence is real, but the sources are traceable. He wants to expose me, but he might get burned at the same time. Helena understood the plan immediately. "You'll let him publish it." Sophia nodded, "And when he does, I'll prove he fabricated it all." Hours later, Alexander leaked the dossier to the press. Headlines appeared within seconds. Sophia Mendez, the mastermind behind the sabotage against her CEO brother. The public reaction was explosive. Her name returned to the spotlight, this time as a confirmed villain. But Sophia had already expected it. Immediately, Helena contacted a trusted journalist and delivered another package, this time with proof that Alexander had altered the file's metadata before sending them. The counterattack was devastating. Within hours, the story changed again. Alexander Mendez tried to incriminate his sister with manipulated evidence.
The council, already weakened, called a new emergency meeting. "This is the end for him," said Helena. But Sophia didn't celebrate. "It's not the end, it's the point of no return." Desperate, Livia called. "I didn't know he was going to use my name. I just wanted my job." Sophia replied coldly, "You had it, for 5 minutes." And she hung up. Hours later, the newspapers reported that she had left the country. The alliance was falling apart, and the game, finally, turned deadly. Meanwhile, Alexander locked himself in his office. Anger gave way to quiet despair. He watched the headlines with trembling hands. "She destroyed me," he whispered. And then he saw a notification on his tablet, an email with no subject line. The content was a single sentence. "With every lie, a truth dies. Yours was the first." The sender was anonymous, but he knew who it was. Sophia, on the other side of the town, closed her laptop with a heavy sigh. Triumph wasn't accompanied by pleasure, only exhaustion. "He'll react," Helena said. "Yes," Sophia replied, "and when he does, he'll fall for good." But deep down, she sensed something was wrong. The plan had become a living, breathing creature, unpredictable, out of control. The following night, a fire broke out at Mendez Corp headquarters. The fire destroyed part of the physical archives, the very original documents that could prove anyone's innocence or guilt. "Coincidence?" Helena asked. Sophia remained silent. "No," she finally replied. "Alexander is erasing the evidence, and perhaps trying to erase himself."
That night's news showed flames consuming the building that symbolized the family's power. Sophia watched from the balcony, her face illuminated by the red glow of the distant fire. "Everything that begins with blood ends in ashes," she murmured. And for the first time she cried, not for the loss, but for the realization that there was no turning back. The Mendez Corp building smelled of smoke and fear. After the fire, parts of the floors were closed off, and the empire that once symbolized power now looked like a field of ruins. Alexandre walked among the rubble, his suit crumpled, his gaze vacant. The reflection in the broken glass showed a defeated man, and for the first time he seemed to realize what he had done, not just to the company, but to himself. In the following days, newspapers were full of headlines. Mendez Corp collapses, CEO under investigation, family at war. Stocks plummeted, investors fled. His father, Edward, could barely get out of bed. The doctor said his heart carried more guilt than blood. Alexandre tried to visit him, but was met with the same look Sophia knew well, the look of someone who no longer believes in redemption. Sophia watched from a distance, joyless. "You won," Helena said, upon seeing the news. "No," she replied. "I just finished what he started." Victory now tasted like iron. Each fall from Alexandre hurt more than she expected. "He was my brother," she whispered, and for the first time her voice broke. Helena, touching her shoulder, replied, "And you're still human, Sophia. Don't forget that." But fate didn't wait for regrets. The board called an extraordinary meeting. One of the oldest shareholders called Sophia. "The time has come. They want to hear you." She hesitated for a few seconds before replying, "Then they will hear me." She spent the night preparing a speech, but deep down she knew she didn't need words. The stage was already set. Alexandre only needed to fall. The next morning, he entered the meeting room like a wounded general. The advisors regarded him coldly. "We are facing an ethical and financial impasse," one of them said, "and we need to decide if you're still the right man to lead." Alexandre lifted his chin. "I built this company from scratch. Every figure, every achievement bears my name." Sophia, sitting in the back of the room, watched in silence. Eduardo, pale, was the last to speak. "You built what I left behind," he said weakly,
and destroyed what I loved most." Alexandre looked at him, confused. "Do you think she's different from me?" His father replied with a heavy sigh. "The difference is that she never had to lie to believe she was powerful." The voting began. One by one, the votes were cast, short, cold, inevitable. When the last vote was recorded, the chairman of the board raised his voice. "By unanimous vote, Alexandre Mendez is removed from his position as CEO of Mendez Corp." The silence that followed was deafening. The sound of an empire crumbling isn't explosive, it's the sound of nothingness.
Alexander didn't react. He just looked around, his eyes brimming with tears. "Do you think she's better than me?" he said, his voice breaking. Sophia stood up. "No, Alexander, just more patient." And then she left the room without looking back. Behind her, her brother sank to his seat, his face in his hands, as the distant sound of applause echoed in the hallway. The main hall was packed. Reporters, investors, family members, everyone waited to see the new face of Mendez Corp. Cameras were streaming live, and the tension was almost palpable. Sophia, dressed in black, entered with firm steps. Each flashbulb that burst felt like thunder. There was silence in the air, the kind of silence that precedes a rain or a condemnation. Elena stood beside her, discreet, almost invisible. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. Sophia replied without hesitation, "I always have been." The master of ceremonies announced the new command, and Sophia stepped up to the podium. The microphone picked up the sound of her breathing. She looked into the cameras and began, "Trust is the only asset that cannot be bought or inherited, and that's why we're here, to rebuild what pride destroyed." The words sounded measured, calculated, but there was pain in them. She spoke of transparency, unity, and rebuilding. She spoke like a leader, but thought like a betrayed daughter. Each sentence was a way of burying the past and building something new from its ashes. "Mendez Corp is not a name," she said at the end. "It's a legacy, and I will protect it, even if I have to protect myself from it." As she spoke, Alexander watched from afar, in an empty office, his tablet on the desk. Her face reflected on the screen, serene, triumphant. And then a notification popped up, a new email. The sender, Sophia Mendez. He clicked. The text read, "The real breach was not of money, it was of trust. The company is mine now." Alexander laughed, a bitter, hoarse laugh. "He learned from me," he murmured. Outside, the journalists applauded. Sophia stepped down from the podium to flashes of light and applause, but the sound seemed distant, almost unreal. Elena watched her with concern. "You won," she said. Sophia replied, her eyes blank. "No, I just put out the fire with gasoline." That night, the building was lit up with the company's new visual identity. The lights reflected the name, Mendez Corp Reborn. Sophia watched from her penthouse, wineglass in hand. "Everything's back to normal," she said softly. But when she glanced at her reflection in the window, she saw something different. The cold, hard, empty gaze, the same one Alexander had. And for the first time, she asked herself, is victory just another kind of ruin? The city was still alive outside, but inside, something had died.
The city was asleep under a light rain when Sophia entered her new office. The walls had been refurbished, the furniture replaced, the logo updated. Everything looked clean, modern, and impeccable. But the smell of smoke from the fire still lingered, as if the past refused to be erased. She walked to the panoramic window and observed the pulsating metropolis below.
Outside, everything was still alive. Inside, the silence was absolute. In the middle of the table, a tablet vibrated with congratulatory messages, interview invitations, and investor meetings. She deleted them all. There was nothing more she needed to hear. Power, she discovered, is quieter than she'd imagined, and infinitely more solitary. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Helena. "It's done. He won't come back." But she didn't send it. She erased the words and put the device aside. Hours later, an envelope was left at the front door. No sender, just her name, handwritten in a handwriting she would recognize even with her eyes closed. Her heart raced. She opened it carefully, and inside was a single sheet, an old photo of the two of them as children, laughing by the pool at her parents' house. On the back was a sentence written in pen. "Not everything that is lost is injustice." No signature, but she knew. Alexander was alive and watching. During the night, the weight of memory began to suffocate her. She sat at her desk and opened her computer, reviewing old reports, messages, decisions. Each document seemed like a distorted mirror of what she had become. "You didn't destroy the monster. You replaced it." The clock read 3 in the morning when the doorbell rang. The dry, insistent sound made her shiver. When I opened the door, there was no one there. Just a box left on the floor, wet from the rain. Inside, a flash drive and a letter. The text was short, almost cruel. "You deleted the wrong evidence, and I'm back." Signature, A.M. Sophia froze. For a moment, she thought about laughing. For another, about crying. But she just closed the door, sat on the floor, and took a deep breath. The past, she realized, doesn't die. It hibernates. And now it was waking up again. The next morning, Helena appeared concerned. "Are you okay?" Sophia looked at her, exhausted. "I don't know what this means anymore." The friend insisted, "What if he really is back?" Sophia replied with a half smile. "So, this time, I'm the one who's going to fall." The following days were a series of public appearances and strategic meetings. Sophia performed her duties perfectly. Rehearsed speeches, controlled smiles, precise answers. No one imagined that behind her impeccable posture, there was a woman in silent collapse. At night, she returned to the penthouse and reviewed the flash drive that had arrived in the mail. But the file was encrypted. The password was a riddle. What remains after victory?
She tried several combinations, without success. Each failed attempt was a cruel reminder. "He always liked games," she murmured. Helena suggested destroying the file. "No," Sophia replied. "This is his. And everything that's his, I need to understand." The hours stretched out in sleepless spirals. In the mirror, she saw her face thinner, her eyes dull. The woman who now ruled an empire felt like a stranger in her own skin. One early morning, as she watched the city's reflection in the windows, she saw a silhouette across the street. A man standing motionless in the rain, staring directly at the building. For a moment, she was sure it was Alexandre. He ran to the balcony, but he had already disappeared. Maybe he never left, he thought. And deep down, he knew it wasn't just him he was talking about. The next day, she received a call from the board. "We need to postpone your press conference. There were doubts about the validity of some old documents." Sophia froze. "Which documents?" "The same ones Alexandre signed with you before your dismissal." She hung up without answering. The message was clear. Her brother's ghost was moving the pieces again, and this time, faceless. That night, she went to her office alone. The empty building echoed with long, cold footsteps. She opened the main room and found a single object on her desk.
The old photo of her and Alexandre, now stained with dried blood. The attached note read, "You wanted the throne. Here it is. But do you feel the weight?" She sat, her gaze lost on the city outside. I won, yes, but all that's left is ash. A tear fell, not of regret, but of realization. Sophia realized there was no longer any difference between her and the man she'd destroyed. The clock struck midnight when the computer turned on by itself. The file on the flash drive began to open, without a password, without a command. The screen went black and a single sentence appeared in white letters. The story begins again when the villain believes he has won. Sophia smiled, a tired, resigned smile. Then let it begin again. The rain hadn't stopped for days. From her rooftop, Sophia watched the gray sky pour over the city, as if the world itself were trying to wash away its sins. The company was back on top. Its stock was rising. Its shareholders were smiling. The newspapers were calling her the woman who saved the empire. But every night, when the city lights went out, she still saw Alexander's reflection in the windows, like a stubborn memory that time refused to wash away.
Helena tried to convince her to rest. "You need to stop, Sophia. You've already won." Sophia looked at her with a tired half-smile. "Overcome what, Helena? It's everywhere, in the reports, in the decisions, in the sound of my own voice. You speak as if you were still here. What if you are?" The answer came whispered, almost a secret. That same night, an envelope was left at the door again. The doorman, startled, said a man had delivered it personally. Inside was just a blank sheet of paper with a sentence typed in plain font. "What remains after victory?" Below, a signature. A.M. Sophia stood still, her heart racing. She picked up the flash drive again and typed in the password. The file opened. It was a video, old footage of the company, of the two of them working side by side, laughing, growing, conquering. Overlapping voices echoed, meetings, decisions, promises. And at the end, the recording of Alexandre, looking directly into the camera. "You won, Sophia, but every victory requires an heir. Take good care of what you destroyed, because now it's yours." The video ended. Black screen, silence. Sophia leaned back in her chair, silent tears falling onto her hands. "You never wanted power. You wanted legacy. And I gave you the worst kind of eternity." She stood, went to the window, and stared at the reflection of her own face. For a moment, she swore she saw her brother's eyes staring back at her, alive, cold, untouched. Days later, the company resumed normal operations. Everything seemed stable. Sophia fulfilled her commitments, but inside, something had broken. The board idolized her, the employees feared her, and the public admired her. But when she walked through the hallways, she swore she heard footsteps behind her. She never saw anyone, just the echo. One quiet morning, Helena called in a panic. "Sophia, Alexandre's personal account has been reactivated. Someone is moving funds in his name." Sophia didn't answer. She walked over to the office mirror, adjusted her blazer, and said calmly, "Leave it. He always liked to start over." He hung up the phone and looked at his reflection one last time. "So, brother, let's start over." The wind blew through the half-open windows, making the curtains dance like ghosts. The security camera flickered, and for a second, a tall shadow crossed the hallway behind her. Sophia didn't turn around. She just smiled. The story begins again when the villain believes he has won. And the screen went dark.
And you? How far would you go for justice, even if it cost your family? Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, because the next stories will prove power changes everything, even who we are.